Hello my friends, welcome back. So, I have another story for you today. It's called The Gnome. What is a gnome? Because again, the popular imagery of a gnome, you know, with a fishing rod on your garden lawn and a hat, isn't quite what this story is about. So I'd like to talk a bit about that before telling the story, and then maybe a little bit about some interpretations, psychological and otherwise, that are sort of baked into this story, but not too much. Before I do any of that though, this here is a pickaxe, obviously. This belonged to my granddad. He was a coal miner in the north of England during the war. So while all his peers were going out to fight, he had to spend most of the day deep underground, ripping out coal of the coal face, and there would be collapses in that pit weekly, and many people would die. It was probably more dangerous than being out on the front in many cases, depending on where in the war you were. The reason I share this is partly because of the subterranean imagery that kind of generates, which features a lot in this story, but also just on a more personal note. I haven't shared this before on this channel. My granddad was a great storyteller. He has the same surname as I do, Lavery, which in the old Irish Gaelic means storyteller. So it runs in the blood, carrying all those old stories of the oral tradition, which I now pass on to you. So this belonged to Fred Lavery, my granddad, and he spent a lot of time underground. Underground is where imagery of the subconscious, deep underground, the underworld, that's where a lot of this story, this mythos, this folk imagery comes from, i.e. the subconscious. And that is very pertinent to this story and the concept of gnomes. So I'll put the pickaxe to one side. By the way, my granddad once swung this back and put it through one of his colleagues' hand, who never quite forgave him through that. So this has caused a bit of injury, this pickaxe. Now, gnomes. What is a gnome? So as I said, we've got the popular imagery of a gnome in our heads, you know, 19th and 20th century lawn ornaments. Much have they fallen. Originally, these were spirits in Renaissance magic. Gnome means earth being or earth dweller, perhaps earth spirit or earth god. I've heard some people call them earth gods, would be more accurate. They're a kind of non-physical, discarnate entity, kind of non-physical intelligence, but associated with the underworld, with the, to use a fancy word, chthonic realm, with the subterranean, with the deep mind, with the unconscious. They're also associated with gold and gems. They're also similar sort of archetypal beings like gnomes are around before the Renaissance. In the early imagination of our European ancestors, think, for example, of the dark elves or dwarfs, they're usually translated as, of Norse and Scandinavian mythology. You know, they make things, they've got lots of gold, they're clever but tricksy, sometimes they'll help you, sometimes they won't. A bit like elves and goblins, and sprites and things like that. But whereas those seem to kind of inhabit this middle world, and other things like other entities might inhabit the upper world, gnomes are down there, but not literally physically down there, obviously sort of down here. Renaissance magic is interesting in this context as well, because you could almost think of Renaissance magic as being a form of Western late medieval shamanism. It's quite similar in its context. You know, an individual will enter an altered state, usually in a kind of ritual space, usually with the aid of appliances or mind-altering substances. He will go on a journey whilst remaining in the same place to an upper or lower world. He will enlist the help of intelligences and entities, maybe secure some as allies or bring back information, things of that nature. So it's a kind of Western shamanism, and gnomes are usually enlisted in Renaissance magic, often for reasons of wealth or traversing the underworld. And that is an element in this story I'm about to tell you.